Assalamu alaikum, and good morning, everybody. Thank you, Glory, and thank you, everyone, for having me here today. This is a beautiful, beautiful venue, so I'm very excited to be here. By way of introduction, I do work for Australian Payments Plus, and for those who don't know who that is, I'll explain in a second. But we are a scheme operator of various payment schemes. Prior to that, I worked for National Australia Bank, where I was head of digital partnerships, and essentially working on collaborations where the bank is collaborating with other organisations, either fintechs or other major banks. And as a result, I've worked in the major banking side. I've also worked in the scheme side, and so I kind of understand the desires and the different complexities of both. Today, I'm just going to spend some time on sort of three major things. I'll talk about what's happening in Australia in digital identity generally, and then I'll talk about Connect ID specifically and what Connect ID is and what the role of banks in collaborating with Connect ID is as well. And then I'll talk about the journey to how we got to where we are today and what some of the learnings that we've picked up as we've gone. Just quickly, in terms of who Australian Payments Plus is. So you may not have heard of AP Plus, you may have heard of some of our schemes. So FPOS is our card rails, our debit card rails. BPay is a bill payments platform. And then finally, the new payments platform, or the NPP, is the real-time payments, so account-to-account real-time payments infrastructure. And that is designated critical infrastructure in Australia. We have a few other brands underneath that you can see. They're sort of slightly more consumer-facing brands. And the last one there is Connect ID. The thing that all of these have in common is that they are schemes. They are networks that have scheme rules, that have technical standards, and that have participation on multiple sides of a market, whether it's acquirers and issuers or sort of bank to bank in the case of new payments platform. And Connect ID is very similar, and I'll touch on that in a second. When we talk about digital ID or digital identity, I just want to set the scene slightly. What we're not talking about is an identifier for a bank account. It's not attached to a payment. It's not attaching your mobile phone number as an addressing layer for your bank account. This is actually about how you prove who you are as an individual online when you're trying to achieve something in the digital space. And so to give a bit of context, in Australia, we don't have a national identity card. Your proof of identity is made up of, you generally use a few different documents to prove your identity, and it's sort of the combination of those documents that gives the confidence that you are who you say you are. So as an example, if I was trying to sign up to a new mobile phone plan online, the way that I would do that is I would take a selfie, and I would take a photo of my driver's license or my passport, and I would send that through the telco company's website, and then they would send that information off to a government database, get a sort of a yes/no tick, and then I can proceed. So that is in a digital experience, that's pretty clunky. It's not a great customer experience, and it happens all the time. It's not just mobile phones, but maybe changing electricity provider or signing up to a retailer or buying alcohol online. It also means that there is lots and lots of sensitive government information or government document information going around the internet. And Baba Abraham talked about the data breaches recently, and Australia's had exactly the same. We've had one of our second largest telco provider, Optus, lost 9 million, I think, Australian records. Our largest health insurance provider lost a pretty similar amount. And so as a result, more than half of all Australians have had their data breached and is freely available to purchase on the black market. And that data includes my driver's license number, my passport number. It's really, it's quite damaging. And so the use of digital identity is intended to minimize the amount of times that you are sharing that data when you're trying to prove who you are. So the vision that we have for a digital identity network is that it is ubiquitous. You just use it in your daily life. We aim to see interoperability between private sector solutions like ourselves as well as government solutions. So the customer should always have the choice about which solution they use and where, but they should always have a means of being able to prove who they are without having to send a copy of their passport or their driver's license. So in Australia, there's a range of government initiatives and there's a range of private sector initiatives, and none of them have yet hit scale. But by way of a little bit of a history, where a lot of this started was in 2019. The Governor of the Reserve Bank of Australia, Dr. Philip Lowe, gave a speech around the importance of the payment system to support the digital economy. And he called out 3 areas of improvement. And one of them that he specifically referenced was the acceleration of the need for digital identity to be in consumers' hands to minimise the data sharing risk. So the fact that the Governor of the Reserve Bank called that out was the thing that kind of got the banks seriously motivated to get involved. Where we are today is we have government initiatives and we have private sector initiatives. Government digital identity initiatives take a number of forms. And so already we're seeing fragmentation even amongst government agencies. So we have MyGovID, which is the federal government's government issued identity service. It's a bit like SingPass, but it doesn't really have the take-up that SingPass does. We also have state governments having their own digital identity initiatives, largely centred around mobile driver's license. All of them are running at different technical standards and they're all trying to achieve different things. And there's no way of actually ingesting that information. If you're a telco provider, there's no way of commonly being able to pull the data in and being able to trust it. Government has another hat, and that is the regulatory hat. So where they had the Trusted Digital Identity Framework, which is something that Connect ID is accredited under, that's now been replaced by legislation. So we have the Digital Identity Act, which will come into force on the 1st of December. And that's designed to promote interoperability between government services, private sector services, and government at various levels as well as private sector. And it has one single regulator, which is the Australian Competition and Consumer Commission. In the private sector, there are a range of initiatives and none of them have yet hit scale. So Australia Post was the first into market in about 2019. And they built they were the market leaders at the time, but they still haven't, 5 years later, they still haven't reached a critical scale. MasterCard have had attempts to join the market and they've used Australia as a bit of a pilot market for them. In terms of they've got global ambitions in identity and they started with Australia. Again, that hasn't really quite got the take up that they would have liked. Then you have ourselves, Connect ID, and then there are a range of sort of smaller startups as well who are getting into this space. But the problem that everybody is facing is how you build the market. So to get the scale that you need for this to be successful, you need to have the users. You need to have the customers using it. But the customers won't use it if there's nowhere to use it. So you need the merchants. So you need to get the merchants on board so that the customers have somewhere to use it. But the merchants won't come on if there isn't customer coverage. So you need a range of identity providers who can cover a large enough part of the market to get the merchants interested. And once the merchants are interested, only then have the customers themselves got somewhere to use it. So you have this it's the cold start problem. And everybody's facing into that. And so far, nobody has managed to solve it, but we'd like to think we're probably the best placed. So that leads me on to Connect ID. So just quickly, when I talk about digital identity, and I touched on it a little bit, but the benefits of having a digital identity system versus just a digitized version of your driver's license or taking a photo and sending it online includes the fact that there's a data minimization principle. There's selective sharing. So on one hand, if I'm just trying to buy alcohol online, my local retailer only needs to know that I'm over 18. They don't need my date of birth. The bouncer at the front door of the licensed venue doesn't need to know where I live or that or my date of birth. They just need a green tick that says that I'm over 18. You've also got the ability of controlling what you share. So you have a consent page, and you can choose to share only certain elements. And some elements will always be required for the thing that you're trying to achieve, but some of them are not always mandatory. As I said, it reduces the amount of sharing of your driver's license or your passport. And for the business, it means that that's less information that they have to hold and secure and protect and have insurance on. And it means that if and when they get leaked, if and when they get hacked, and we're not silly, hacking will still continue in the future, but it means that the information that does get leaked is less critical, less sensitive to the individual, and therefore has less repercussions for the business who's been breached. And finally, you've got the ability to remediate it. So if I've created a digital identity with my bank or my government agency, that will be to have created the digital identity, they will have used my driver's license or my passport or my Medicare card or whatever as a series of documents to prove that I am Rick. But then what they share about me isn't those documents, it's just, trusted organisation like a bank says that this really is Rick. So that if something does go wrong and we have an Optus breach or another major data leakage, then if that digital credential has been compromised, it's more easy for me as the customer to reset that credential, because the driver's license and the passport that we used to create it, they're still clean. They're not the things that have been compromised. So it's actually relatively easy to reset when something does go wrong. Finally, we do have a really strong principle, and this is probably cultural for Australia, but we have a really strong principle that this should always be optional. If a customer wants to share their passport online, that's okay. If they want to walk into a branch and do it over the counter, that's okay. We don't want to force people into digital identities, because then you lose the trust. It becomes, if people feel like they're being forced into using it and they don't fully understand it, they won't trust it and they'll just go and do something else. So then this is the Connect ID ecosystem. And so we call it a four-corner market. What we have is, and I'll start with number 2, our identity providers on the left-hand side. So an identity provider is a trusted organisation who proves that I am Rick, and then shares that information with what we call a relying party. In payments land, that's typically a merchant. The identity providers that we have right now are Commonwealth Bank, National Australia Bank, and ANZ Plus. With Westpac, who is the 4th of our major banks, they're coming very soon. Literally, I'm looking at emails as we speak. In the future, it won't be bank only. We've started there to help us with the scale, but we'd fully expect this to be an open market that includes government issuers or other private sector issuers or other banks. On the right-hand side, our relying parties. So they are sort of the equivalent of merchants. And so they're the business that is looking to confirm my identity. So that is the telco, the utilities company, the government agency, my new employer, a university that I'm trying to sign up to, or just a retailer who needs to know that I'm over 18. At the very top is the consumer, and they are in control of the transaction. The transaction doesn't happen without the consumer initiating it. So it's fully in control of the customer. And then finally, you've got Connect ID. So our role, we are a scheme operator. So we run a small piece of central technology that allows all the organisations in the network to trust each other. That way you know that it really is Telstra or a major telco asking for the information, and not a fake website pretending to be the telco. We run the rules, all the governance and all the operations of the network. It's our job to do the business development. So we have to go and build the market. We have to get the relying parties. We organise the ecosystem roadmap. So what are the next wave of features that we're going to bring into the network. And a lot of that has a dependency on the identity providers being the ones actually doing the work. The final thing that I'll mention is the data transfer here. So the big dotted line through the middle, when a customer chooses to share their data with the relying party, that data goes directly from the bank to the relying party, and it doesn't touch Connect ID at all. So we don't know who the customer is ever. We know that a transaction has occurred so that we can manage audit trails and billings and billing and things like that, but we don't know who the customer is at any time. The advantage of the network structure here is really about building the market. So for a relying party, if each bank just went off and did their own identity service, the relying party would have to integrate 4 times. They'd have four different sets of commercial terms. Then you add state governments doing things, and you add federal government doing things, and you add Australia Post, and suddenly you have lots of different technology standards, lots of different commercial terms, different pricing arrangements. And so there's the incentive for a relying party to do all of those things is pretty limited. So the value of having the network is that they only do it once. So I'm going to do a quick UX demo. So the example here is I'm a customer signing up to a new electricity provider. So this is, all these brands are fake brands, but I'm moving house and I'm signing up to my new power company. So I've chosen my electricity plan, and then this is the page where I would ask to provide my personal information. So on the bottom half of the screen here is the part where it would actually ask me to type in my name, address, date of birth, maybe my driver's license number. So that can all go off and be checked. But instead we have a Verify with Connect ID button. I click the button. My very next screen is what we call our IDP selector. So this is where the customer gets to choose who they want to use to prove their identity. And you can see with the UX, this is all about creating trust in the journey. So we've got the continuity of the Connect ID logo coming through. We've got the electricity company's logo coming through. So the customer still knows what they're doing. We're really upfront about what information is being requested by the electricity company. So in this case, it's my name, my address, my date of birth, my email, and my phone number. And then I get to choose which provider I'm most comfortable using. So these are all fake brands, but at the moment it's in production. We have 3 live banks with more on the way. So I'm going to choose my purple A bank. I get redirected out to my banking app and I authenticate, just like normal, just like I was making a payment or checking my balance. Once I've authenticated, I then get what we call the consent screen. So I'm inside my banking app, and again, we can see that Synergy, the electricity company, is asking for my name, address, date of birth, and I can click down and just double check those details. So I'm comfortable with the details, I choose to share it, or if I'm not, I can cancel out. But in this case, I choose to share it, and I get redirected back to the electricity company, and you can now see that my information has been populated down below with my name, address, date of birth, email, phone, and a little verified lockup at the bottom. So all of that has taken 10 or 15 seconds. I haven't had to type in my information. And for the retailer, they also get the benefit that the information that they've received, firstly, it's been verified, but it also just avoids things like fat fingers or use of different names. So common names like Alexander and Alex get used interchangeably, but if you're trying to ping a government database, the difference will mean that it fails. Here you know that everything's been cleansed through. Really similar UX example here, but this just shows the power of the data minimization. So in this example, we're buying a bottle of alcohol online. The retailer just needs to know my name and the fact that I'm over 18. And so when we get to the consent screen, those are the only things that are being shared. Not my date of birth, not my email, not my phone. And then that goes through to the bottle shop. So therefore, in terms of where we are today, These are the use cases that we have live at the moment. And I said at the start, we want this to be ubiquitous in people's daily lives. The main sort of, the top line here is where all the focus is. So the customer onboarding journey into retail environments, maybe maybe the goods are age restricted, or maybe you're just, as a retailer, you have a high fraud problem. You sell iPhones and you want that extra level of assurance before you send out a phone to the buyer. So you want to sort of put the customer through this online verification before you deal with them. Utilities, electricity, gas, I've just been through, telco, financial services, banking, KYC, but also sort of other services like payments, remittance, foreign exchange, those sorts of things, all have identity proofing requirements under Australian law. The gig economy, so you're signing up as an Uber driver or a customer of Uber, or you're renting your house on Airbnb. Again, it's a scenario where you need to have confidence, or at least the platform needs to have confidence that the driver is who they say they are, or the person really does own the house and can rent it out. And travel's another area. Age verification, I've talked about, and employment's a great one. Employment, if you think about you're a hospitality business, a restaurant that employs lots of university students, or a retailer at a shopping mall that employs lots of university students, and you have very high turnover of staff. The ability to onboard and verify those staff quickly and easily is extraordinary. You can also do reference checks, so using, if I'm being named as a referee for somebody else, confirming it really is me doing it and not just sort of that person's brother or that person's best friend. And then in time, we can also add additional credentials into the network. So not just, am I Rick, but am I Rick and am I a licensed electrician, or have I completed this safety training to go onto this work site? So you can really get quite big with this. The rental market in Australia also comes with just a million requirements for document checks, proof of identity, both for the landlord, but also obviously for the tenant as well. Social commerce, so things like I'm buying a car, I'm selling something on Facebook Marketplace. It's a really big area for scams right now, and so the ability to just sort of pretty quickly, easily, cheaply verify that person is who they say they are is really valuable. And then you get into the public sector use cases, so the government use cases. If you think about the number of times a government agency is paying out funds to people, they need to understand where that money is going. And there are some processes in place, but also if you have something like disaster relief, actually you're trying to move really quickly and get money into the hands of people who need it. And those people might not have been on your records already. They're not people who get fortnightly, handouts. These are people whose houses have just been flooded and they need money tomorrow. So there's a really big opportunity here. So then just getting into sort of the advantage of the network model here, and I touched on it a bit at the start. With the network model, what we're trying to do is solve for the cold start problem. How do you build adoption? If you look at where Connect ID is, by having the 4 major banks up and running, we can cover about 80% of the Australian population. We actually think it's a bit higher than that. If you are one of the other providers in Australia, you just have your own customers. And so to take the Australia Post example or the MyGov example, theoretically 100% of customers could sign up. But the difference is, for them to do that, they've got to download the app, they've got to go through a 100-point check, they do the selfie and the passport thing to create that app. With your bank's already done that. They did it, a few weeks ago, or a few months ago, or a few years ago. So they already know who you are. They've been through the KYC process. They've seen all of this stuff. So the first time you use your bank as an identity provider is exactly the same as the 100th time. And that's really powerful for adoption. In terms of usage, sort of, as I said, it happens straight away. You don't have to download the app. The bank can already support it. I can go into a Commonwealth Bank app right now, or the National Australia Bank app right now and use it, and I didn't have to do anything different. compared to others where you've got to sort of go through that process. And as soon as you make people have to download an app, they won't. Security. So we run on a peer-to-peer network that means that ConnectID never sees the data. It's also run on sort of global security standards. So we use OpenID Connect as the technical protocol, and what's described as FAPI2 for security, and that is the latest sort of API security layer. Other systems they have different approaches, different layers of security, different architectures, and potentially even creating their own new data stores, which then become a target in their own right. Finally, the customer journey. It's really important. We talked about the clunkiness of the driver's license and the selfie. Here, it's just really slick, really easy, and it's familiar. You're just being redirected to your banking app. You log in like you would for anything else. The screen looks broadly like it would in a normal banking app, even though you're doing a brand new function. So it's a really familiar, trusted experience straight away. We had a lot of fun this year. We got to start marketing. It's a bit unusual as a scheme to be marketing direct to consumers, but it's important for us because we need to build trust in the brand, trust in the network, and we need to, in the customer journey, a customer will have to choose to use ConnectID. They'll have other options. They might still choose, they might have the option to do the selfie and the driver's license, or there might be another provider. So we need to build trust in the brand. So we went to market. Having the 3 bank logos down the bottom is hugely powerful. Like, that's where we get the trust. So you get the brand association of ConnectID is backed by the banks. We got a little bit cheeky with some of the taglines, but this was all about getting attention and getting people aware of the risks of data sharing. Here's a few of the examples out in the wild. It's always great seeing your business on a bus stop, in the newspaper, on the back of a bus. But what's really exciting are the top 2 here, where for the first time, we've actually got co-branding with one of our banks. So Commonwealth Bank, which is the largest consumer bank in Australia, they are now co-branding with us. And so this top one appears in electronic mail-outs. It also appears on the ATM screens. So while you're waiting for your money, you get to see that screen. And then in here, that's in a Commonwealth Bank branch. So that's really exciting. And the best part about it is that it puts the peer pressure on the others to follow suit. So then in terms of how did we get here? So it's been a long road. 2019 was when the banks first started having a conversation around this. And I was working for National Australia Bank at the time. And it's a really, really long journey. Digital identity was a pretty new concept at the time. So everyone involved was still trying to figure out, what is it? What's the opportunity for banks? Why should we even be doing this? Is it commercial? Is it just the right thing to do? What's the real driver here? No one was really sure. And is it something that we can all just do separately? If you're Commonwealth Bank and you've got 30+% market share, can you just do it yourself? And then we really quickly realised, no, you can't, because you might have 30% of the market, but what about the other 70? If you're a merchant, you need to solve for the other 70. So that's where the network comes in. Over the next couple of years, they appointed initially BPay and what has now become Australian Payments Plus as the network operator, so managing the collaboration. And then a few years of build work, technical POCs, more than one, vendor assessments, business cases, use cases, going out, testing with markets, testing with consumers, testing with merchants. Hey, if we did this, will this be of interest to you? So much governance. And then by the time you actually get to the point of everyone being on board and having to build, you've then got to go back to all the banks and get in the queue for tech prioritisation, which is hard. In 2021, we were accredited by the federal government, which was a big win for us. We were the first non-public sector business to get accredited. And this time last year, so 12 months ago, we launched. In 2024, ANZ went live earlier this year, and Westpac is sort of within a matter of days. Our focus for the next couple of years is just build the market, get the merchants, get the customer adoption. So then what's critical to keeping this momentum? If you told us 5 years ago that it would take 4 years to get to launch, we wouldn't have done it. And then the banks wouldn't have supported it. You can't build a business case that says, I'm going to do 4 years worth of work for nothing. So you need the buy-in of the institutions. You need the institutions to want to do it. They need to want to be there, because there are bumps and it's going to get hard, and it's pretty easy if the institutions aren't committed for them to just go, you know what, this is a pretty crappy business case, I'm going to go elsewhere. You also need the people to be individually committed. If people are just kind of doing it off the side of their desk, it's not going to go very far. But with the right people, it works really well. So the collaboration is great, and obviously the title of today is collaboration to build cyber resilience, and that's exactly what this is. There's the old proverb, if you want to go fast, go alone, and if you want to go far, go together, and that's exactly what this is. It's taken 5 years, we're still not there, but we've built the best platform we possibly can and have built something that no one could have built alone. But for that to happen, a few things need to be true. So you need to get the right people in the room, and deciding who the right people are, the right institutions are, is hard. Who do you leave out? Who has to be there? Who adds additional value? Who would be less helpful in the early stages? So figuring that out is important. How do you get multiple institutions to actually do stuff and make progress? Doing stuff, like talking about stuff is easy, but doing stuff's really hard. So how you put a framework in place to encourage that's really important. Aligning on the business model and aligning on the tech approach, really fundamental things you need to get right up front. And they can change over time collectively, but you need to have an understanding on day one, what are we doing and what are we not doing? What is this? And then governance and decision making is all of you working in payment schemes will fully understand this. What are the decision rights of the scheme versus the decision rights of a governance committee? And it's always a moving feast, and it's always difficult. And then finally, competition law. Stick a bunch of banks in a room and want to create a network, you need to start paying lawyers. So you need to set budget aside for the lawyers. In terms of public and private, so the Australian market and the Indonesian market and the Singaporean market and the Indian market, they're all different. In our market, it's really important to build relationships with government, but they also don't kind of tell you what to do. So it's a bit of a funny mix. Probably the threshold question is, what is the role of government in citizens' everyday life? So if you look at, say, SingPass versus MyGovID in Australia or RealMe in New Zealand, MyGovID and RealMe, some people have downloaded them, no one really uses them, there isn't really too many places to use them. SingPass, everyone has it, everyone uses it all the time. But that's partly due to the nature of the relationship between Singaporeans and their government. In Australia, the good thing is everyone wants it to succeed. So people want this to work. There's still competing priorities. They want their thing to work rather than your thing. But everyone wants digital identity generally to work, and so it's a good community. But you sort of need to keep fostering the relationships. We are really conscious that the government wears many hats. In Australia, they are a provider of identities. They're also a source document for the banks to create their own identities. So they're a supplier in that sense. They're also a network. The Australian government's built its own network, a bit like Connect ID. So they're slightly a competitor. They're also a regulator. They also wrote the legislation and they're in charge of the policy. So when you're having various conversations with government, you need to understand, for this organisation, for this agency, what are their goals and how can we help? And that's usually where you can sort of get a little bit of a bit of favour. But of course, that's sort of unique to our context. But I think sort of principles-wise, I think it's a valuable lesson. So that's the end of the talk. I guess just to sort of reflect, we've been doing this for 5 years. We've been in market for 1. It's hard. It really is hard. There's been a lot of late nights by many people over the last few years. We're really conscious that we're celebrating having got to the start line, but we've also seen so many market initiatives that have not really got the adoption that you'd like to have, or just never quite got off the ground. And I'm sure you've all seen those, in the payments industry here as well. So we're really acutely conscious of that. So for the next 12 months, for us, it's all about growth of merchants, customer awareness, customer adoption, and we're looking at metrics every single day: click-through rates, successful transactions, eyeballs. We're looking at that constantly and just watching it tick up slowly. So I've spent the last 40 minutes talking about the success of Connect ID and the effort of getting to where we are today, but the reality is we've only just begun. So, thank you.